The studio lights of ITV's Loose Women are notoriously bright, but on this particular Tuesday afternoon they seem to burn hotter than ever as Sir Ian McKellen, dressed in an impeccable charcoal three-piece suit and scarlet pocket square, took his seat among the panel. The audience had been told they were in for a treat, the legendary Gandalf himself discussing his new one-man Shakespeare show, his lifelong activism, and perhaps a few light-hearted stories about Magneto's helmet. What nobody expected was that within 8 minutes the conversation would veer into territory so volatile that producers would later claim they had no choice but to pull the plug mid-sentence. It all started innocently enough when host Charlene White asked Sir Ian about the current state of LGBTQ+ rights in Britain. The 85-year-old actor smiled warmly, thanked the panel for the invitation, and began by praising the progress made since his own coming out in 1988. Then Denise Welch, never one to let a topic drift into polite consensus, leaned forward and declared that in her view the conversation around trans rights had gone too far and was now erasing women. The temperature in the room changed instantly. You could almost hear the collective intake of breath from both the studio audience and the millions watching at home. Sir Ian's eyebrows rose a fraction, the way they do when Gandalf realizes Saruman has finally lost the plot. He placed his teacup carefully on the table and asked Denise, with exquisite politeness, whether she believed that trans women were not women. Denise, emboldened by years of speaking her mind on the very same sofa, replied that biological reality cannot be wished away and that women's sex-based rights were under threat. The audience erupted into a mixture of cheers and gasps. Janet Street Porter tried to interject with a joke about everyone needing a gin, but nobody was laughing anymore. Sir Ian removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly with a silk handkerchief, and then delivered a response so measured yet so cutting that clips would be shared millions of times before tea time. He reminded Denise that he had marched against Section 28 while she was still on Coronation Street playing cheerful barmaids, that he had lost friends to AIDS while the government looked the other way, and that the same arguments now being used against trans people were the exact ones used against gay men 30 years earlier. The applause that followed was thunderous, but Denise was not finished. Denise's voice rose as she accused Sir Ian of not understanding women's fears and claimed that some activists wanted to put rapists in women's prisons. The audience groaned audibly. Kay Adams attempted to move the conversation onto safer ground, something about Shakespeare's sonnets perhaps, but Sir Ian held up a hand and asked for the floor. What followed was a masterclass in controlled fury. He spoke of visiting trans youth who had attempted suicide because of the climate of fear whipped up by certain sections of the media, of elderly trans women terrified to leave their homes, and of the long history of feminists and gay activists standing together against oppression. When Denise interrupted again, insisting that nobody is saying trans people shouldn't have rights, Sir Ian's composure finally cracked. In a moment that instantly became a gif, he looked directly at her and said, "My dear, that is precisely what you have been saying for the last 5 minutes, and I have sat here patiently while you did it." The studio fell silent. You could have heard a loose sequin drop. Behind the scenes, producers were frantically signaling to the gallery. Advertisements were supposed to be 3 minutes away, but the segment was spiraling. Nadia Sawalha tried to lighten the mood by joking that she needed a lie down, but the tension only thickened. Sir Ian, now fully in the zone, turned to the audience and asked how many people in the room had a trans friend, child, or family member. Dozens of hands shot up. He then asked how many felt safer because biological sex had been mentioned on daytime television that afternoon. Not a single hand. Denise, face flushed, accused him of shouting down women and said she felt ganged up on. At that point Charlene White made the fateful decision to go to the break early, thanking Sir Ian for his candor and promising viewers they would continue this important debate after the adverts. The cameras cut to a tampon commercial featuring women dancing on a beach. Backstage, all hell broke loose. When the show returned, Sir Ian McKellen was no longer in his seat. In his place sat a slightly bewildered-looking Robbie Williams, who had been booked months earlier to talk about his new album. The panel looked shell-shocked. Charlene apologized profusely, explaining that Sir Ian had chosen to leave the studio and that the program respected his decision. Social media, however, had already detonated, Ian McKellen and Loose Women were trending worldwide within minutes. Clips of the exchange racked up tens of millions of views. Trans supporters hailed Sir Ian as a hero. Gender-critical campaigners accused ITV of censorship. Denise Welch posted a tearful video on Instagram claiming she had been ambushed and that the actor had stormed off like a diva. Sir Ian, meanwhile, released a short statement via his publicist thanking the audience for their warmth and adding simply, "Some conversations are too important to be had in 7-minute segments between makeup ads." By 6 o'clock that evening, ITV had quietly removed the episode from ITVX. The fallout dominated news cycles for days. Newspapers that normally disagreed on everything found rare unity in declaring it the most explosive Loose Women moment ever. Former panelists Wade and Colleen Nolan said she wished she'd been there with a fire extinguisher, while Jane Moore defended Denise's right to express concerns. Sir Ian, ever the professional, gave no further interviews but was spotted 2 nights later at the opening of his Shakespeare show, where he received a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. When asked by a reporter outside the theater about the incident, he smiled serenely and quoted King Lear, "I am a man more sinned against than sinning." Whether that was aimed at Denise Welch, ITV, or the entire culture war circus remains a matter of delicious speculation. One thing, however, is certain. In the annals of British daytime television, the day Gandalf walked off Loose Women will be spoken of with the same hushed reverence once reserved for Judy Finnegan's bra malfunction and the time David Cameron left his daughter in a pub.